At the dawn of the 20th century, the world still believed that the future could be better than the past. In 1900, Paris hosted the Universal Exposition, an enormous celebration of science, industry, culture, and human progress. More than 50 million visitors arrived from across the globe. New inventions promised to transform everyday life, while education and technology appeared capable of bringing nations closer together. The new century seemed to begin with extraordinary optimism. But within 14 years, that optimism would be shattered. In 1914, Europe descended into the First World War. What many believed would be a short conflict became 4 years of unprecedented destruction. Millions of soldiers and civilians died, entire communities were devastated, and old political structures began to collapse. Germany emerged from the war defeated and deeply wounded. For many Germans, the defeat was not simply a military loss. It became a national humiliation. The peace settlement imposed in 1919 placed severe restrictions on Germany, reduced its territory, limited its armed forces, and required the country to accept responsibility for the war and pay substantial reparations. The new German government, known as the Weimar Republic, inherited this enormous burden. The country was politically divided and economically unstable. During the early 1920s, inflation became so severe that German currency rapidly lost its value. Savings disappeared. Families struggled to buy basic necessities. In some cases, money became practically worthless. For a brief period, the economy stabilized. Then, in 1929, the Great Depression struck. Germany's banking system suffered a devastating collapse. Unemployment surged, eventually reaching approximately 22% by 1930. Millions of people faced poverty and uncertainty. The political consequences were just as severe. Street demonstrations became increasingly violent. Political parties maintained paramilitary organizations that fought opponents and intimidated voters. In 1 month alone in 1932, 99 people were killed in political violence. Fear spread through German society. Many citizens worried about communism, unemployment, crime, social change, and the apparent weakness of democratic government. Traditional values seemed to be disappearing, while rapid industrialization and urbanization were transforming everyday life. Women entered the workforce in greater numbers. Women had gained the right to vote under the new constitution. Social and sexual norms were changing. Crime was increasing. To many Germans, the country appeared to be losing its direction. It was in this atmosphere that Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party gained influence. Hitler had become leader of the National Socialist German Workers' Party in 1921. His failed attempt to overthrow the government in 1923 resulted in imprisonment, but the trial gave him national attention. During his imprisonment, Hitler dictated Mein Kampf, outlining an extremist ideological vision built around territorial expansion, racial hierarchy, and the removal of Jews and other groups he regarded as enemies. After his release, Hitler reorganized the Nazi movement. The Nazis developed an extensive political organization, produced propaganda, recruited supporters, and used modern communication methods to reach millions of Germans. Their message was deliberately simple. Germany had been betrayed, its economy had been destroyed, and the nation needed a strong leader to restore its greatness. The Nazis attracted support from sections of the middle class, professionals, students, civil servants, shopkeepers, and others affected by the Depression. Yet there was an important fact often overlooked. Hitler never won an outright majority in a free national election. The Nazis became the largest political force, but no party could secure a clear parliamentary majority. Germany's political system became increasingly paralyzed. Then, in January 1933, President Paul von Hindenburg appointed Hitler chancellor. The decision was made by conservative political figures who believed they could use Hitler's popularity while keeping him under control. They were catastrophically wrong. Only weeks later, the German parliament building was set on fire. Hitler and his allies used the incident to claim that Germany faced a communist threat. Emergency measures followed. Civil liberties were suspended, allowing the government to arrest opponents, restrict political activity, and expand police powers. Political opponents were among the first victims. Trade union leaders, members of opposition parties, and left-wing politicians were arrested. Thousands were sent to newly established concentration camps. Germany's democracy was being dismantled from within. Hitler's government simultaneously worked to create the appearance of national unity. Propaganda presented the new leadership as a force capable of restoring order, employment, military strength, and national pride. When Hindenburg died in 1934, Hitler eliminated the position of president and combined the highest offices of the state. He became Führer. The armed forces swore personal allegiance to him. Civil servants, teachers, police officers, judges, and other officials were also required to pledge loyalty to Hitler rather than to the constitution. Germany was no longer a functioning democracy. It was becoming a dictatorship. The Nazis then began transforming German society according to their racial ideology. They claimed that humanity was divided into superior and inferior races. Jews, Roma, Slavs, Black people, and people with physical or mental disabilities were targeted by a system built upon pseudoscientific racial theories. Anti-Semitism became official government policy. Before the Nazis came to power, Germany's Jewish population possessed the rights of citizenship. After 1933, those rights were progressively dismantled. Jewish people were pushed out of public life, excluded from professions, restricted in education, and subjected to hundreds of discriminatory laws and regulations. The persecution was gradual, but relentless. For many Jewish families, everyday life became increasingly hostile. Propaganda portrayed Jews as dangerous outsiders. Public anti-Semitism became normalized. Children encountered racist ideas in schools, while newspapers and political organizations reinforced the message. Then came 1938. German forces entered Austria, bringing its Jewish population under Nazi rule. The persecution there accelerated with extraordinary speed. In November, the Nazi regime organized a nationwide wave of anti-Jewish violence. Synagogues were burned. Jewish businesses were destroyed. Thousands of Jewish people were arrested and sent to concentration camps. The violence became known as Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass, a reference to the shattered windows that covered German streets. More than 7,000 Jewish-owned businesses were vandalized, and over 250 synagogues were damaged or destroyed. The message was unmistakable. The German state was no longer merely discriminating against Jews. It was openly persecuting them. Many Jewish families desperately attempted to escape. Some who had the resources sought refuge abroad. Others faced restrictive immigration policies and bureaucratic barriers in potential destination countries. Some parents were forced to make an unbearable decision, sending their children away alone in the hope that they would survive. But the danger was expanding beyond Germany. Hitler's regime had always pursued territorial expansion. Germany began violating the restrictions imposed after the First World War and increasingly challenged neighboring countries. The occupation of Prague made the Nazi government's intentions impossible to ignore. Then, on September 1, 1939, German forces invaded Poland. The Second World War had begun. German military victories followed with remarkable speed. Denmark and Norway were occupied in 1940. German forces then attacked Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and France. Paris fell. France surrendered. The victories transformed Hitler's standing among many Germans. The humiliations of the First World War appeared, for a time, to have been reversed. But the war was entering an even more brutal phase. In June 1941, Germany launched its invasion of the Soviet Union with more than 3 million soldiers. This was not simply a conventional military campaign. Nazi leaders presented the conflict as an ideological and racial war. German forces advanced into Eastern Europe, bringing millions of additional Jewish people under Nazi control. Ghettos were established, forcing Jewish communities into overcrowded areas surrounded by walls and barbed wire. Soviet prisoners of war were also subjected to brutal treatment. Millions died from shootings, starvation, exposure, and deliberate neglect. Behind the advancing German armies came mobile killing units. These units, supported by elements of the German military and police, carried out mass shootings of Jews and other targeted groups. Victims were rounded up, transported to killing sites, forced to remove their clothing, and murdered. The machinery of Nazi persecution had evolved into something far more systematic and deadly. What had begun with propaganda, political manipulation, economic promises, and discrimination had developed into dictatorship, territorial conquest, mass imprisonment, and organized murder. The century that had opened in Paris with dreams of progress had entered one of the darkest chapters in human history. The rise of Nazi Germany was not the result of a single event. It emerged through a combination of war, humiliation, economic collapse, political instability, propaganda, fear, prejudice, and the destruction of democratic institutions. And perhaps the most disturbing lesson was that the transformation did not happen overnight. Step by step, rights were removed. Opponents were silenced. Propaganda replaced truth. Discrimination became law. Violence became policy. And eventually, persecution became mass murder. The catastrophe that followed would consume much of Europe and leave a permanent mark on the history of humanity.